Hello there, and welcome back to the most arbitrary and self-indulgent series on YouTube. The scores don't matter, it doesn't change how I or anyone else feels about the game in question, but I enjoy making it, so I may as well fill the internet with guff. This time around we're heading into Dark Souls 2, and I'm actually super excited about it. The format and systems in play are exactly the same, the full rundown is in the Demon Souls one if it gets confusing. Consistency is the goal rather than overall critique. It's not a review, it's just a silly little exercise in applying the same scale to all the main content in the game instead of playing favourites. I'm playing Scholar of the First Sin on PS5, which actually does have enough differences that it could be argued that I need to do it and the original, but I can't record clips on my PS3, and I can't be bothered, so this is all we're getting. While the format and the idea is the same as the last two, there is a slight difference here in that this is the first of these games I'm coming into with negative baggage and minimal specific memories. I played this once when it first came out, and I thought it was mediocre. Not terrible, but not good, you know? It's still a Souls game, so it still hits a passable standard, but it's just not very good. I've grown to dislike the rhetoric of it still being better than most games that come out because it's kind of unrealistic in practice. Sure, if I compared it to everything being put out, yeah, I'd like it more than 99% of that. But that's true of every semi-competent game ever made. If I'm only looking at stuff that I've actually been willing to play over my lifetime, it's pretty middle of the pack, which is reflective of its status when you don't count all of those Steam shovelware or mobile slop games that no one buys. Over the last 12 years, my thoughts on it have calcified and hardened, to the point that I now see fans of it as the equivalent of like Star Wars prequel defenders. The bits I actually enjoyed basically faded from memory, and only the bits that I hated remained. I know that I like Drangleic as a level, but the only parts of it that I remember are the terrible boss and that awful room with like 6 sentinels in it. It's like anti-nostalgia goggles. So with all that, I'm really keen to get back into it and see how my slowly amplified animosity stacks up to reality of something that at the time I thought was merely subpar. This is also going to be my far least informed run of any of these games. I've played this once on PS3, so with the Scholar changes being new to me as well, I might actually miss a few things. Hopefully I won't. In a lot of ways, this is going to be a somewhat blind playthrough. I don't remember where any of the good loot is, I don't remember what I used, I don't remember what the meta builds were or where I need to go. I'm hoping to do something based around axes, because that's what my DS1 run was meant to be, but I don't know where any are or which ones are good. But enough reminiscing about hatred, let's get this rolling. After an extremely cool looking intro clip where the game just laughs about how hard it is for 10 minutes and doesn't tell you anything about the actual story or world, we roll into things betwixt. I like that the actual tutorial stuff is optional, so you can just run down the middle and not take any of the little education loops if you don't want them, and you're happy passing up some experience and loot. It does teach you basic combat and introduces torches, but there isn't a boss here, which is wild. This game has like 60 bosses, why isn't there one here? So after running through there in 15 seconds, or doing some minor torchlighting, we're into Majula, and I don't get it. People are really ride or die for this place, and it just doesn't do anything for me. It's peaceful, but I don't find it all that nice to look at. The grass is all ugly and brown, and the buildings are all dilapidated and in hideous hobo shacks. There's pig rats in the corner making ugly sounds. The blacksmith looks like a cartoon orc. It links to a lot of areas, but they're strung out instead of clever links back. You're never going to just come back here through any chance. There's really nothing of note within its actual borders. I guess the mansion has a skeleton? I really don't see what everyone raves about. Is it just the sun? Do you all just like looking at the sun? Following that apparent highlight, we're off to the first level. And you know what? The Forest of Fallen Giants rules. I was worried this is all going to be snarky complaining, but this first stage is honestly right up there in contention with being the best level in the series so far. It's got a great looking mix of Boletaria and like Blighttown or something, with the overgrowth and ramshackle woodwork all getting turned up to 11. It's got so many distinct areas crammed into it. There's the opening sleeping mob gank, the drop down the wall to the fire longsword, the Archer gank township with the clever explosive shortcut, the courtyards with the patches gank trap and the ballista gank, the ocean views rubble with the sword gank, the fire pit, the invasion wing with the turtle-like gank. All that stuff is effectively linked to one bonfire, even if there are 3 here for no particular reason. You may have noticed me say gank like 7 times there, because that's the design mindset on display. And it's pretty annoying to deal with. I think I've actually learned how to play this stuff better now after Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, so now I lock off and actually have a lot of fun ducking and weaving and trying to stagger multiple enemies with single swings and so on. It's still obnoxious dealing with this many guys all the time, and the parts of the archers involved are really irritating given how bad the stagger in the game is, but I had a lot of fun with it. It also does the Asylum Demon thing that we missed in the tutorial, with the Pursuer showing up to wreck your day before becoming a boss later on. As for bosses, there's 2 here. First up is the Last Giant, which annoyingly required me to summon Pate for his questline, But on the other hand, they added an NPC summon for a damn dual Great Seal Havel monster, so of course I brought him along too, because that's hilarious. This does mean that I kinda missed the fight to a degree. He actually moved around a lot more than I remembered, so I actually got stood on and slapped quite a bit despite him having plenty of other people to distract him. I kinda had to mad charge him to make sure that Patches didn't die, so I couldn't really hang back and get a good look at what he does, but it must be said that he is so big that you really can't see anything bar legs unless you run across the entire arena. But that's just the first boss. Now it's the return of the Pursuer after he probably messed you up earlier in the level. I don't love the Pursuer, but he's pretty solid. I like him more as an enemy as he shows up later. He's a distinctive looking guy for sure with that shield and weird body shape, but I don't like that he's so ethereal. His floating instead of walking is a thing that people could like, but I can't imagine anyone enjoying how there's no feedback for your hits on him. It just looks and feels wrong. Mechanically, he's extremely intimidating at first because when you're in his face, he's relentless and his swings happen in an instant, but once you learn how to maintain space and dodge, he's really only got 3 moves and he's pretty easily maintained. I'm giving him a tilt point for the ballistas in the arena, even though I've literally never been able to land a single shot with them. I remember the Bastille boss being particularly nasty, so instead I went off to High Terror Flame, and this place blows. Don't get me wrong, it looks amazing. Water looking a little bit like a Windows 1998 background aside, it still holds up amazingly graphically, and the Dragon Edition gives the place a bit more pizzazz, but it's basically not a level. The level design in this place is a goddamn T-intersection. Absolutely the worst we've seen in the series so far in regards to layout, except maybe Valley of the Drakes. And this is an actual level. The enemies are pretty good in isolation, but the mob pools at some points encourage dull kiting. And the Hyde Knights waking up after half the level is done makes me glad despawning is a thing, because that duo right at the start is terrible. I guess technically the path to No Man's Wharf is also part of this level. It's again just a straight line, albeit with one loot room that's locked behind a branch. I'm going to be nice and not have this part influence the score at all, because all it would do is bring down the visuals. As with the forest, there's 2 bosses here, but unlike the forest, these ones are both terrible. Dragon Rider doesn't look good. I guess he is recognisable, so that keeps him from being marked down for being a lame grape with a stick. And he's genuinely got less combat skill than the Turtle Knights or the Hippo Men in the first level, so it's just an absolute joke. The other boss here is maybe better? I don't know, I didn't even heal in this one, so maybe not. And that's not even including the sheer offensiveness of what they did to my boy. Look what they did to my boy! It's Ornstein, but only phase 1, without a buddy, and he is not enough in this form. You walk slightly to the right, he whiffs, you physically abuse your positive childhood memories. One of my few memories of the original is that I ran both Dragon Rider and Beta Rorns in a single rest, and my weapon broke on him, so I had to go through all of my gear and find some other weapon that I could equip mid-fight, and I still won easily. Never meet your heroes, guys. Way back when I started doing this, I mentioned the idea was spawned by a conversation that I had with a friend about Dark Souls 2. I had been utterly baffled by their claim that Hades Tower was an incredible level due to it just being a T-intersection, but their claim about No Man's Wharf baffles me even more. They put this in the rat boss tier of terrible low points, but I think that No Man's Wharf is one of the best levels in the series. It's a large, intricate level with lots of interesting enemies providing a solid mix of ganks and dueling. There's a couple of shortcuts, a couple of them are really good. There's multiple approaches through the various parts of the map. The lighted up with torches optional gimmick feels nice to do. There's 3 really good NPCs. I guess the pirate theming doesn't feel super Dark Soulsian, but other than the ship itself, the enemies in it still fit in and are cool. The only thing I could nitpick is that both the shortcuts are in the last 5 seconds of the level, so the one near Gavilan is basically useless, but I'm never going to complain about shortcut spam. I actually completely forgot to include the Flexile Sentry in my chart when I came through, and I didn't notice that he wasn't even there, which I guess is a bad sign that he's that forgettable. He looks cool. The 2 sides having different movesets is a cool idea, but both sides are kind of similar to fight, and it's not as hard as the design warranted. As with the Giant, I had to summon for Lucatiel's quest, which did lessen my engagement with the fight. With both entrances open, I finally went into Lost Bastille, and everyone, I think I've got to admit that I'm enjoying myself. For the 3rd time in 4 levels, the Lost Bastille is a winner. It's not great looking, but it lives up to the complexity of having 2 entrances by having a huge number of ways to get through it. I'm not fond of the one-way drop at the start of the forest route, and putting a statue block in front of the absolutely integral boss room is absolutely asinine, but otherwise this place is fantastic. There's a nice mix of ganks and one-on-one duels, with 4 Pachura invasions breaking up the tempo really well. In my first playthrough in Vanilla, I remember that the Ruin Sentinels absolutely ruined me. Apparently I'm better at multi-fights because this was actually pretty easy now. I still don't like the fight much, but for different reasons than in the past. I think that they're basically balanced around that possibility of a throw in one, so the recovery time between each of their swings is obscene. And if you don't fall off the starting platform and kill one of the trio up there, it's pretty easy just to kite them around or trade with the generous healing opportunities. It does feel nice when you land a nice juicy hit on more than one at once though. I'm conflicted with these next two areas. They feel just like name wings of the Greater Bastille, but they do satisfy my requirements to count as individual levels. They've got a name that pops up, and they have a small but notable volume of content. Belfry Luna is definitely big enough to count with the boss, the Bell Tower PvP area, and the Invasion Dog Pit within it. The biggest argument against it is that it doesn't have any unique looks, so it absolutely feels like a building within the level, because that's what it is. In the end, I used the logic that if DS1 had given the Forest Covenant area a special name, I'd have counted it, and that's the equivalent of what's happening here. The Belfry Gargoyles again go for the gank mob idea, but do it better than the Sentinels, I think. There's a lot of Gargoyles in this one. I think I had 4 active at once at its peak. They chase more aggressively and have a wider range of attacks with aerial swoops and fire breath. On paper this sounds horrible, but they don't hit that hard and are fairly squishy, so it's actually quite a lot of fun running up and down the level sneaking in smacks when you can, and deciding when to trade when it might get one of them killed. Life gems absolutely trivialise it though. It's really quite hard in New Game Plus though. Sinner's Rise is questionable for the opposite reasons to the Belfry. It looks pretty distinct, the architecture is different, the flooded base level and elevator are both unlike anything in the Bastille, but there's very, very little here. There's a couple of arches, an elevator, a flexile sentry, and some explodey dudes in a pond, and we're done. It's not really much more than Latria 3 from Demon Souls, but it's not really any less than Valley of the Drakes either. One of the main downsides of trying to make these playthroughs super thorough is that I'm doing all the NPC quests, which means that I have to summon for the Lost Sinner, which is a boss that generally I really like. I tried using the Red Eye Ring to keep aggro, but our Scared of the Dark Lass just really hates Lucatiel. I remember this one being one of the better fights in the game, but yeah, I don't know, she looked kinda slow compared to my memory as I bashed her head in from behind. On my quest to actually maybe like DS2 now, I must admit I always did like the 3 levels that I like so far. So now we're onto the one which I've always used as an example of DS2 having awful levels in. Did they change it a bunch in Scholar? Because I quite like it now. Sure, it's ugly as sin, and it avoids the shortcut for the chariot out of nothing but spite, but there aren't really any of the horrible ganks that I remember. I like the mix of ambush hunters, shambling undead, big dudes, and the dark weapon knights. The necromancer gimmick isn't handled as well as the catacombs were in DS1, but there's like 4 ways to enter the area and each impacts your approach. And most importantly, there's that dude who just runs everywhere as fast as he can for no goddamn reason, and I love him. While all the paths are basically straight outside of the necromancer cave, there are 2 bosses here and they're built up better than the ones in the Putrid Tower of Flame. I hit up the skeleton loads first, yet another gank fight, but easily the most harmless one so far. There's 3 of them. They slowly shoot fireballs at you. When one dies, a bunch of skeletons spawn. It's a long, boring sequence of running from corpse mound to mound, wiping out the early arrivals before the unmanageable mob arrives. I do like the look of the arena though. The other boss here is a combination of a gimmicky gank boss and a real boss, and generally I like it. The big issue is getting trapped in little corners or getting wiped while you're in one because you were smacking away skellies and your hand went 3 pixels over the line when the pony came by. Surprisingly, with the necromancer and gate gimmicks, the actual fight at the end is still one of the better ones. As a horse, he's quite a foreign design to fight with his jumps and kicks and charges, all with a fairly off-kilter timing which can take a little bit of learning, but not so much that you'll need to run the gimmick more than a couple of times at most. I was pretty tempted to acidic him right now for the Chlorantha ring, and I wasn't dreading the idea of refighting him immediately. I'm glad I didn't though, because those skellies get nasty with the buffed HP. The next area is the reason why I chose this route over the Ratfall or Scorpion Wife, since I now have my Gavlan axe. I'll actually need to start leveling intelligently from here instead of just wastefully dumping stats into magic to progress NPC events, but Scholar gives so many souls that I'll probably be able to 2-hand it by the old Iron King. Harvest Valley itself is an arse full of pee. It looks horrible, ugly poison fog and cliffs, blech. The level design is incredibly poor for the critical path. It's a straight path with literally 2 enemies on it, but there's actually a decent amount of stuff to do off it, and a lot of it is really, really good for loot. Sadly, the extra loot areas are just running around in poison fog fighting dregs, or the most garbage gank ambush we've seen so far, so not good. It does get a tilt point for gifting us 3 crystal lizards, but there's really nothing here to like. Now the next boss is technically in the next area, but it's right near the start, so I'm putting him here. And he's a fitting send-off to a level with no substance, and whatever else is there is really bad. The Covetous Demon is a useless slug. I actually got hit here, which is probably the most embarrassing thing I'll ever put in the internet. He has movement abilities that looks like what you'd think he'd do. I guess he has a few gimmick actions like eating the hollows in the arena, but again, that just means you get to beat him up more. His E move is theoretically interesting, but no one is ever going to just stand in front of him. The Fellier Slug's home is Earthen Peak, basically this game's version of Sen's Fortress, but nowhere near that annoying. There's only one shortcut here, and there's only like 4 enemies between it and the third bonfire, so it doesn't really do much. But there's quite a lot of hidden looting spots, and there's no shortage of secrets to uncover. There's a lot of ganking, but those points I wasted getting Corellian to move to Medulla came in handy because you can usually pick them off with soul arrows. It loses a point because of the windmill burning thing, which is just stupid. The main boss of the area isn't much better than the entry slug. Mythra is clearly balanced around you not knowing the windmill thing, so her downtime between attacks is long enough for you to heal, cure poison, get an attack off, and read the newspaper before she acts again. I was being quite passive in this fight just to make sure I didn't get grabbed, because that's still pretty nasty, and it resulted in these weird sections where we both just stood there for like 8 seconds waiting for each other to go first. After a couple of bad bosses and shifty areas, we're off to what's obviously on top of a windmill, a giant endless lava field. Iron Keep is a kinda tough one to get my head around. I think the first half is a fun place to get through, but it's a god-awful boss run. You don't need arrows to work through it, just be patient and careful and manage where you're standing as you attract more knight attention. Getting from archer to archer without getting you swamped by melee dudes is the real secret, and the access points change as you open the way forward. It's fairly enjoyable. However, there is no shortcut for the Smelter Demon boss, which is easily the hardest boss we've come across so far. So now when you're trying to get back in for another attempt with 60,000 souls sitting in the room, that slow, measured progress becomes a huge weakness. With the aggro ranges of the enemies here, there are 3 enemies in the entire section that will not be rapidly chasing you down if you bolt to the fog door. 3. Out of like 17 or something. That's a pretty big fog door interrupt dice roll with 4 levels on the line. Not to mention getting to the admittedly kinda overrated Lockstone Waterpool puts you right in the most intense piece of gank in the whole sequence too. Working through this stuff safely a dozen times does get extremely old, so I get why people try to brute force the sprint, even if it's clearly not how you're meant to get through and it doesn't work. It's one of the few times I say the game actually did need another bonfire, since this boss is such a learning experience, although a shortcut at the Lockstone going back inside would have also worked okay. After that is the second half, which actually has quite a lot going on even if the direct path is very simple. There's a loop back to Belfry Sol, which I'm not calling an area as it doesn't have the drop section, boss or post-boss invasion of Belfry Luna. The platform sequence can manipulate into a few different routes. There's some pretty nasty fire resist check stuff. This one actually does do the Mercy Bonfire, which it really didn't need to do since the direct path only has you fighting like 4 turtle dudes and 2 guards. I guess my obscene death axe 1 or 2-shotting everything made the narrow sections more simple than it could have been. I'm going to try my best to separate the Smelter Demon from his boss run. He's the first hard fight we've had all game, as is our introduction to both delayed attacks and double or triple tap combos that can wipe you. And he comes with a somewhat gimmicky HP drain effect for most of the fight. He's actually quite a lot of fun once you've learned him, but he's one of those bosses that you're probably not going to learn on the fly. It's going to take a few wipes. His swings have very variable tempos. The wide sweeps open with the first swing, which is about half a second later than would feel natural to me at least, but his slams and thrusts are immediate. I also think that he has 2 timings on his downwards thrust slam, one being pretty instant, and one where he hangs in the air long enough for you to do a panic roll, recover, and still roll the slam. Once again, once you've got a head around these, it's actually quite fun ducking and weaving, but you're just going to die a heap of times getting to that point. And it feels pretty unfair during this phase since you are short on defensive measures. Spoilers for my opinions on Elden Ring boss design. The fire aura is just a straight negative in the end. It's just unavoidable, cheap damage. And I don't think the Lockstone pool is actually that much help since it only lasts like a minute into the fight, and even with my cartoonishly OP weapon, he was never going to die that fast. Also, technically this is a required NPC summon boss, but Lucatil needs to survive 3 out of 4 fights, and the other 3 are a million times easier, and actually gains bonus anti-summon defense buffs, so this is one that people are going to skip her for. The other boss here is just pathetic. His DS2 has attempted a Dragon God setup, but it comes across more like a Bowser fight. He's a big, cheesy cartoon demon who blows some fire at you that you have to dodge until he finally decides to bless you with the laziest fist slams you've ever seen, at which point he leaves his hand there for 10 seconds to let you chunk him. The only concern is falling into the tiny lava hole. The loser can't even bet of chaos, right? At this point, I decided to take my giant murder axe on a little aesthetic tour of bosses that I wanted to get New Game Plus rewards from. I gotta say, the Executioner's Chariot is really rough with basically no defense. You really can't charge and hope. But with that done, I could now go into the Shaded Woods, giant murder axe in single hand. The Shaded Woods is a surprisingly diverse little spot. In theory it's just trees and grass, but there's the foggy forest in the middle and the curse pot divergences in the back half. At this stage, I'm starting to pick up that DS2's level design isn't brain-dead simple, just the critical path is. These levels have next to no intricacies on their main path to progress, it's always just plainly signposted the whole way through, but there are a lot of little side loops for loot, and some of them are fairly clever with drops and whatnot. This one has a window jump you can do to save a branch of yore, and some collapsing ground to free a later merchant to go along with the usual optional loot dump rooms. Factory Defect Qualag is up next, and it's again ruined by these pesky quest summons. I'm not 100% certain if Tark needed to be summoned for all the rewards he offered, but I was convinced he was required for at least the branch. I tried to spice the fight up, seeing if she has a tail cut, but I was probably hitting too far up the base to be sure. Doesn't even have a cool intro to set the mood. Feeling cute, might aesthetic later. Following this up is a novelty PvP mini dungeon which basically just generates Vextra to Life advertising money by having 1 billion lockstones and like 4 of them that are actually helpful. I'm offline, so I'm missing the multiplayer aspect, but by 2026 it's probably not going to be saving it for anyone now. There's actually a boss in here, and after Factory Defect Qualag, we've got Factory Defect Sif. This fight is entirely about you knowing to bow up and kill some rats before anyone gets in melee range or not. If you don't get Toxics, it's an ugly, simple, albeit whiff-filled breeze. If you do get Toxic, it's a mess of trying to heal and smack annoying rats while Junkie Sif smashes you around. Dull fight or annoying fight? Either way looks like total ass. After that stinky toilet of a diversion, we're back on the main route forward, and again, it's a big one with a lot going on. Brightstone Cove is a military encampment, followed by a workers' cult, then a spider-infested desert valley village thing, complete with a giant sand vortex, and then a massive descending spider den. Within that, we've got a hidden blacksmith, the ending of our paid quest, and our partner NPC. It's not screwing around. Again, direct routes are fast, but there's a lot to do on the sides, obviously. The issues here are with the one-way drops and the annoyance of some of the enemy groups. The exploration loses something where you need to keep running to the boss bonfire or resetting with Homeward Bones to really feel like you've explored every route. The mages have crazy homing spells, and the spiders come in like groups of 20. So getting all that together and an NPC invader in and around an NPC, it just gets messy. It's a pretty awful run back if you happen to die at the boss or the mob at the boss door. And then again, there's like one-way drops everywhere that you can't walk back out of, which I just don't like. There are 2 bosses along the path, but do we really want to call this first one a boss? The Prowling Magus is a mob, and not even a very hard mob. Like if you get 2 pigs, an archer, and a sword guy following you in the army camp, that's going to be infinitely more difficult to handle than these chumps. I actually missed that this was one where I needed to bring along a summon, so I set it straight afterwards and it was still just as easy. In theory, there could be something here. There's a primary caster, 2 healers, and a mob of, well, mobs. So I could imagine that they could be a boss. But everything dies in 2 hits, so whatever. The Duke's Dear Freya is also largely a mob, but this mob is way more annoying. Their attempt to put the armor spider on the ground really doesn't work. It has a few attacks in front which hit hard, but as long as you stay patient about bashing the faces, it's really not a big issue. What is the big issue is the 20 goddamn spiders in the arena who just pester and slap you while you're just trying to get into a good position to punish. They're not going to kill you, but they're annoying. They're so small that half my freehand swings just whiffed over them, adding to the annoyance when I did try to trim the lawn. It's a lame fight, trying to hide behind it being an annoying gank that we've already done 5 times in the level. With our 3rd Great Soul in the bag, there's nothing less for us to do but to spend 30,000 souls on ladders and rings and get down to the Grave of Saints, which is just the doors of Pharos again, but now it looks like garbage. This one at least doesn't actually have any real treasure in it, so you can just read that one sentence of Vextra Life and then just not hit any of the locks. I was still in the Rat Covenant from Pharos, so nothing even attacked me. I missed out on hollows and rats. This place is nothing. This dull-ass place has a boss, and somehow it's even more dumb and lazy than the area itself. It's a room full of rats. You smack a bunch of rats until one with a mohawk shows up, then you hit that 3 times. You laugh, you make a dismissive wanking action, and then go to the gutter. Of course I like the gutter. It's the most on-brand thing ever. The gutter is this game's Valley of Defilement or Blighttown, and in some ways it's the best one, and in other ways it's the worst. While there is a one-way drop at the bottom third of it, which I don't like, generally speaking is a sprawling labyrinth of drops and jumps and ladders that feed back into themselves and reveal new treasures over and over and over. The sconce gimmick comes into its own here, and it feels amazing lighting this place up one little torch at a time. If you get all of them, there's a reward NPC invasion which drops unique gear. It's lovely. The downside of it, aside from that one-way drop, is the enemy selection. Blighttown is full of these totally unique, depraved and deformed, rotted gremlin people and giant bloated corpse things. The Valley of Defilement has these hulking, misshapen wolf lizard men things. And the gutter has hollows. You guys bothered making a unique type of enemy for the New Game Plus starting area, but you filled your version of Blighttown with hollows. Come on, B-Team, what the hell? There's a sense of foreboding fear from the noises and groans from all the darkness, and it's missing, and it holds back what would have been a winner. As always, they forgot to put a boss on the rotting woodwork nightmarescape for some unknowable reason, so we're off to the Black Gulch, which is ironically very green. There's a couple of subtle drop-offs here that let us finish up an NPC quest and make progress towards getting Dark Lurker in a while. The main path is the worst straight line thing we've seen all game, knocking off even the Tower of Flame. Instead it replaces combat and exploration and enemies and looting with getting pelted by poison blobs by inanimate objects. It's not a winner, okay? And finishing off the first half of the game for us is the Rotten. A cool idea executed not great. The bits that are clearly people are just people-esque and don't blend well. It just kind of looks like a big slime monster. Again, I need to bring along Lucatiel to get her quest finished up. I tried to mess around with some stuff to see what he can do. And I don't think I've ever seen that grab attack before, and it's a sick animation. But at some point, Lucatiel started to look pretty deathly, so I had to finish things up. With all the early game finished up, we're into the spike end of DS2 with Drangleic Castle, since the Shrine of Winter is just a part of the Shaded Woods. Don't at me. This is a very good stage, with all my issues being fairly abstracted from what it is, so maybe being a little picky. It looks cool. The rain kicking in literally 6 seconds after leaving the fairly bright Shaded Woods is a little goofy, but it sets a good mood. I like the statues everywhere, half of which come to life, which adds some tension and creepiness to their presence. My main issue with the place is how video gamey it feels. I mean, it's not like the other games have that much effort put into making their castles feel like realistic, functional places to live, but this place isn't falling apart. It's just designed to be some wacky Mario level. I will say I remember this place being way harder. I'm not sure if it's just because my axe kills everything so quickly that I could keep on top of the numbers as they pop up, or if they made it easier. There's 2 bosses in here, and surprisingly I didn't actually mind the repeat Dragon Riders as much as I thought I would. I think the Archer phase actually works quite well. The Great Bow rhythm is pretty in line with the Spear Guy swings, so you end up with this nice pace of getting a hitting and rolling right as the arrow arrives, and it feels cool. Once he gets on the ground, it falls apart a little bit because they do the exact same thing, so it's just a matter of waiting for them to both drop a combo at the same time and chipping them down. The second boss is the real showpiece, and again it's one with good rewards tied to an NPC quest which requires you to bring someone along. The shield is cool, but overall I think he'd fail the shrink him down and put him in another game would I recognize him test. Unlike the Pursuer, that big ass shield does actually have a passive function all the time, forcing me to work on the left side, which is a kind of neat change up to the pacing. He's definitely built around having the evil summon add in there, so there's a lot of time between his swings, which makes him a little bit too easy to work over, and the summoning animation takes so long and my axe does so much damage that any time it decides to use it, I could just obliterate him and not have to deal with it. With Drangleic cleared, we gain access to the Shrine of Amana, a place I've been actually pretty defensive of in the past. Unlike my other personal and popular favourites like the Valley of Defilement, however, I did come around to the consensus here and hated it. I'm not sure if they made it harder, or if my weapon was just bad because it misses half its attacks against the water dudes, but this one tilted the hell out of me. Much like the Iron Keep, it's alright as a first time through patient trek. If you take your time to clear out a bunch of the hidden guys before they aggro, stop at the pillars to slowly work your way towards casters while handling the ambushes which come up along the way, it's still obnoxious, but it's not that bad. But when you try to pick up the pace at all, it becomes an absolute nightmare of homing lasers, melee dudes who run faster than you, and bleeding-juicing fishmen who duck under half your attacks through happenstance. Obviously, patience solve it, but I lost so many souls here. Also, whoever put the Equipped and Destruction Pod Army on the boss run hallway should be jailed for life. I have no idea what that's supposed to do except for screw over melee players and bore the hell out of everyone else. The boss here is one that I really want to like, but his mechanics let him down. He's an incredibly unique concept. He's like this guy living inside a frog thing. It's super weird and interesting even if the man inside looks kinda dumb. The issue is that mechanically he has a transition phase between defense and attack mode, so there's a long pause between invulnerable and damage phases. His damage is so high, at least if you got all your armor destroyed by the pots and didn't realise, that getting fancy with it is generally a pretty bad idea. He could absolutely one-shot me, but obviously I have basically all my points in strength and unused magic stats to get treasures from merchants, so I may be an outlier in that regard. But for me, I really just had to play it safe and wait for him to do whatever harmless face-out move he felt like while I stood safely to his side. Then boop him once or twice when he closes the eyelid, since trying to grab extra damage while the arms were moving didn't go well. After the annoying mess of Armana is the annoying mess of the Undead Crypt, which does a much better job of showing how to do an annoying mess level. It's an intimidating dark crypt which utilizes the gimmick of summoning bells and spawners in cramped rock-filled rooms, which depending on the destructiveness of enemies can be a tiptoe or a mad dash. The enemies here are fun to fight, so I don't really mind how messy it can get, but with some forethought you can maintain safe exits pretty well and the shortcut is well placed. In my playthrough a decade ago, I considered Velstad to be peak. Like in terms of big human guy fights at this stage, it was like Artorias, Super Orns, Alant, and then Velstad. I mean, I guess there wasn't much other competition, so it may still be that, but goddamn is he mediocre. Cool cloak, cool hat, cool hammer, but god, this fight is ass. He's got so little going on. He has like 2 incredibly slow melee combos that are all easy to read, and he has absolutely zero protection from the back or sides. Honestly, if I wasn't unsure if his so-called phase change had an AoE, I probably could have axed him to death then and there. Genuinely pathetic effort from this old legend. After saying hello to Vendrick and pinching all his bling, I had a few options and I chose to get over to the Dragon by going through Aldir's Keep. This place looks cool, it's an impressive looking structure from the outside, but it has a giant skeleton on the stairs, and the enemies breaking through mirrors is sick. All the various creatures trapped in flimsy cages look great, but mechanically it's a mess. Despite clearly being a wide building, it really is just a completely unobscured straight shot through like 4 trolls. Not gonna lie, I ditched my melee mindset here and just churn through everyone with a bow because it's unpleasant. More unpleasant, however, is the NPC quest here. Not the end of Lucatiel's quest, that went fine, but in here there's a merchant in a cell with a big rewarding quest that is obscenely easy to break. As I don't remember the game, my approach to this playthrough has been to go in blind, and when I find an NPC, I'll look them up and I'll see if they have any quests aligned to them, and it's generally worked pretty well. Well, this time, I went left behind the stairs and found a switch before I went right to actually meet the NPC, and hitting that switch broke the quest irreparably. Admittedly, there are a lot of development messages telling you not to do it, but there's also some near various sconces, and they unlock the key to fully explore the level. It actively rewards you for ignoring the warnings in the same level. In this case, I thought the switch was going to make the big skeleton dragon wake up, and I wanted to fight the skeleton dragon, but alas, it doesn't do that. Instead, it ruins an NPC quest and makes your game worse. If you go right and meet the NPC, you'll get a new character with some lore and a whole long quest line that can be approached in multiple ways, which elevates the value of other side quests, with multiple special rewards including a unique spell and pyromancy. If you go left and hit the tempting button, you lose all of that and get invaded a bunch of times. It's a big penalty for making a wrong turn. The boss here is cool, but not really all that great. It's a pretty generic looking dragon, but dragons are cool, so there's worse things to be generic at. The fact that he's become a standard enemy in the very next area, and had been present in the second level of the game, does lessen him a bit. Him having the big How to Train Your Dragon caged arena does elevate it somewhat. I like his moveset, there's your usual stomps and swipes, a fire breath down that you need to run from, a very cool breath of fire thing while holding onto the cage move, but they're so spaced out and low damage that he's really not threatening at all. The area holding 3 more of these dudes is the Dragon Area, which looks amazing but otherwise blows. It looks fantastic. Floating islands with dragons flying around everywhere, it's straight up some Avatar stuff. There are also of course those 3 dragons to fight, which are even more simple but I still like them. Everything else here though is awful. It's full of dudes who explode and wreck all your gear in like 2 hits. They can chain attacks with how long it takes to stand back up, so I hope you like spending 20,000 souls every time you take a trip through. They're not even hard, they're just incredibly annoying, particularly around invaders. There's a branch blocking the entrance now, so they made the end of level shortcut be open from the very start, allowing you to skip the whole level if you like, which is just stupid. There's multiple dead end drops for loot which require you to warp back out, which obviously I always hate. And then there's the goddamn bridge at the end. I don't know if it's just set up to kill you all the time now, or if I missed some kind of hidden mechanic, because I killed all the dragons and I didn't destroy the eggs. Looking it up, it says the trigger is 7 eggs, but I destroyed like 2 of them, and it still killed me every time. Maybe it's a bug or something? I had to randomly assume they had to destroy all the eggs to get past, so I had to make a whole nother lap through. It's beyond asinine. There's no boss here, so instead we go into the second half of the level with the Dragon Shrine. They really fixed this place up. I remember it being a giant pain, but now it's more or less just a spectacle. The Dragon Guard's respectfully watching you prove your might against the 4 Black Knight variants, one at a time mind you, thank God, is just good cinema. There's some drops and loops for some very good treasure, and indeed the dragon ring here finally let you stop looking at my beautiful naked visage. But by and large, it's just a good, easygoing fun time for the whole family. The only issue is that there's no boss here. Unless... This axe is insanity. I counted it out. It took me a mere 30 swings to bring down this 20,000 HP behemoth. He dried so fast that the magic weapon didn't even wear off in the endless endurance fight. I don't even care about the boss, I just want to marry this axe. If I did have to care about the boss, he's not very good. Obviously I know the strats here. In my failed attempts I did get a couple of flyers, but it's really just a matter of sprinting to his tail, and I was only taking half my health in damage when I stuffed that up. His stomps are a one-shot, but as long as you don't put the camera somewhere you can't see, it's just a matter of time. He's very slow and has a pretty easily abused moveset. It just tries to get through with massively inflated stats. With our activities for the base game dwindling, I headed off to clear the Giant's memories. Technically this is 3 separate areas, but they're designed to be easily completed within 5 minutes and serve the same purpose and are in the same setting, so I'm going to be nice and combine them. Even combined, they're not the best 10 minutes the game has to offer. They're more Forest of Fallen Giants, except there's a black and white filter. They're straight shots to an endpoint, with only one time ending with a boss. I guess one of them has a couple of loot side paths, but by and large, they're just enemy tunnels. There is some spectacle of the guards fighting the giants as you burn through it all, but it's not much. One of these stages does actually come with a boss, and again it's pretty reskinny. The Giant Lord is basically the last giant again, but now he has a skirt. He swings a giant sword instead of his arms, which is less cool, and due to his size you basically won't be able to see what he's doing in that regard anyway. It's another smack them in the ankles and roll away when they raise their foot boss. I'm not going to hold the NPC summon aspect against this one because the boss itself feels very side content-y, so it doesn't make me feel like I'm watering down anything important. With all my giant souls, Vendrick's not getting any easier now, so I may as well commit a little bit of murder. Vendrick is something of a story boss like true King Allant, but he also hits like a goddamn truck. This makes him, honestly, a bit of a pain. I like his emaciated, hollowed wreck aesthetic. I want a little subversion of how he'd been built up all game, so the vibes are good, but it's such a sloppy fight. He just kind of slowly flails around, seemingly harmlessly, but he has 1 billion health, and he dies if he tags you once, so it ends up feeling quite tedious. So now we're just down to Dark Lurker, who I've never fought or unlocked before actually, so I guess I need to do whatever Wheelchair Buddy wants me to do. As with the memories, I'm going to bulk them all together since they're all so small and basically the same thing. I think this is meant to be the Abyss from the DS1 DLC, and the style is not there. The nice shiny rocks are replaced with the most generic cave textures you've ever seen. They're basically just 1 or 2 rooms with 4 to 6 NPCs in there. Some of them are one-on-ones, some of them are ganks. Some of the levels have holes. They're not great. I don't like that you need to use consumables to enter them, although it shouldn't take you 50 tries to beat, so it's kind of a moot threat. On the plus side, I really like the boss. I didn't do Dark Lurker in my old PS3 playthrough, and I regret that, because they're a lot of fun. They're very slow, but the moves all do dramatically different things. But since they're mostly based around variances and running in certain patterns, once it splits into 2 and you've got to deal with multiple at once, they still mesh, and the slow tempo makes more sense. Comfortably the best boss in the base game for me. I like leaving the ends of games till the end, so I'm going to put off the ending boss rush until after the DLCs, which I've also never done. I'm going to hit them in order of release, which means we're going to the Sanctum City. This DLC is more or less one big level with 3 name segments. First up is the city portion. This place looks pretty awesome. The green shading with the pyramid and unique architecture stands out, the towers moving up and down shifts the layout in a fairly fun way. My main issue with the layout, aside from the presence of gear wrecker bugs, is that they absolutely fumble the shortcut near the gang squad. There's a shortcut to the last bonfire in literally the same room as the new bonfire. While the run back to the boss is a slog, all they had to do was move that last bonfire into the last room of the cave before the boss, and it would have been a 5. Passing over the next area until we can clear it, we're going to skip ahead to the Gang Squad tunnel. This place is just a run back to an astoundingly unpleasant boss. I was tempted to just include this in the city, but it isn't really any smaller than the Chasm of the Abyss in DS1, and it has a name, so I guess we have to be consistent. It's a boss run which is largely tedious. It's something of an Iron Keep situation where it's quite manageable if you take your time, but a wild dash can make a mess very, very quickly. I'm not going to lie, I cheesed the hell out of this with a bow. I'm not jumping in that hole with like 60,000 souls sitting in the boss room. The boss following up the Gang Cave is fittingly the Gang Squad. It's basically just the worst Dark Lurker cave segments, except everyone has 3 times as much health and is twice as aggressive. Learning where the loops are is irritating, and once you know them, it's a tedious 8-minute cycle of dropping down holes and trying to get a pop shot on anyone loose before the mob catches up in the next 4 seconds. If you bring a full stack of life gems, it's basically impossible to lose, but it's easy to lose patience and try something stupid. I got close a couple of times, but I got annoyed and just brought along the summons, which actually didn't completely remove the fight. You still need to make tactical choices, since if one summon dies, you're basically back to the same old loop and now everyone has double HP. A lot of people swear by going for the archer, but I found it far more effective to take down the samurai first, since she wipes your friends so quickly and it's easier to grab backstabs on a distracted guy than on a speedy lady with a rapier. The Sanctum is less visually impressive than the outside. It's just a greenish grey tomb, and as such it's just a bunch of fairly cramped halls and rooms. But there's stuff to like. There's some optional treasure routes and some shortcuts. The ghost enemies you need to destroy the tombs of is a solid gimmick, even if the second run to the area is a bit excessive. You need to run directly past multiple, take a ladder, cross a bridge, fight a mage while being tailed by the ghosts, cross another bridge, then go into another room with 3 more ghosts. Given that there's several extra areas to access down here which could distract you, that's a hell of a lot to bumble through while being mobbed by dudes you can't fight. After that is a lake full of big dinosaur things with no value beyond material farming, then a series of one-way drops, also with no value. I honestly can't comprehend what the point of all the one-way drops is. Admittedly, not many people are going to bother walking up from the hidden bonfire to hunt the crystal lizards, but why? Seriously, what is gained by putting 4 one-way drops in the way down to this? There's 3 enemies. It's literally just to ruin the idea of flowing level design. If you watch the Demon Souls one of this series, you may remember that I had one boss that I ruined by one-shotting it, therefore making it impossible for me to really rate what it does or is at all. Alana is this run's version of that. I saw her summon skeletons, she did an AoE, she shot 3 of the slowest magic balls at me that you've ever seen, and she did a single swing of melee. That's all she had time for before I deleted her in 8 swings. She does not have the health, mobility, or close range defenses to handle my output. I was keen to see if Velstadt would regain his splendor in a 2-on-1, but I didn't even kill all the skeletons before she died. I wanted to jokingly belittle her as a buff skeleton lords, but they were harder. Anyway, she's basically just a reskin of Rissandra, except she has gank powers and I barely noticed her existing. Next. This DLC has weird boss progression, so the third boss of the region is literally behind the second one. Yep, we have a big city area, then a tomb, then a lake, then another tomb, then back-to-back bosses to close it out with a single mandatory boss before that. Sin is pretty meh. I've seen people call it the best dragon fight From has ever done, but yeah, I don't see it. They're really good at building up dragons, but not so good at making the fights. Sin isn't even all that well built up. I read the crown and soul descriptions, and it still just seems like it's just a random dragon that happened to be what they built the city around. No one remembers the king, or the dragon, or the guy who stabbed the dragon, so who gives a crap? It's kind of small, and I didn't even notice the apparently distinctive spear in it. Anyway, Sin spends about 80% of the fight flying around doing 2 moves that are easily dodged before flying off again. I think the longest time I spent in continuous active combat with this thing was about 11 seconds. When you do get the odd chance to get in melee range, its bite hitbox is just the entire front of its body, and it will chunk you for half your health. Then it'll fly off again before trying to kill you. Sometimes there'll be some toxic laying around for some reason. I like the move where it turns its neck and burns you for sitting on its ass, but otherwise this fight is mediocre as hell. Just way too much flying. So that's one DLC down, and so far I'm not unhappy but also unimpressed. The level design was solid, but the bosses were one shocker and 2-minute affairs with atrocious pacing. So we'll move into the one with the famous Fume Knight next. I really like Broom Tower as a level. Some of the engagements it sets up for you are way over the top, like that room with the wedge buff, 3 dudes, a big guy, a guy throwing firebombs and an exploding barrel guy, or that heinous curse invasion for instance, but generally it's pretty great. It's got the best skybox in the game, and while it is samey, it feels intentional in how each part of the tower feels similar but has something distinct to draw you towards it. I like how intricate the ladder and drop routes make planning routes quite forward thought intensive, and some unreasonable mobs aside, the enemies are solid. The first boss I ran into here was the Blue Smelter Demon, waiting down at the end of the Iron Passage. It's a similar approach to the Gang Squad run back, but a billion times worse. It's probably the nicest looking cave From have ever made, but it's probably the worst level ever made by humans. Whoever pitched it deserves to have mosquitoes around them, just all the time, forever. I guess I should give it credit for providing 2 routes, but when the routes are the worst gank you've ever imagined, and dangerous timed runs through the second worst gank you've ever imagined, I'm not going to. Smelter Demon is back, and this time he's blue. I think the blue looks better on him to be honest, but he is a reskin and a copy-paste boss. Thankfully, it is a good one, and I really enjoyed the rematch. The only real change is the insane delay on that one backswing, but otherwise it's just a nice reminder of the high point of the game. I enjoyed this encounter a lot more than the first one for some reason, maybe because my health was now high enough to not really be bothered by the aura, and since I already knew the moveset, there was no learning process, purely execution. The next fight here is the Fume Knight, who is fantastic. The best thing about him is the rhythm. He doesn't look anything special in the footage, but he feels great to fight. He doesn't have that many moves, and they're not very complex. He doesn't have very much flash to him, but the tempo is just great. It's very turn-based. With him doing a move, then you get to heal or hit once. It kind of reminds me of Maria or Artorias, except he doesn't have half as much style and is slower. You're not going to outspace him, so you just got to sit in close and keep it up the whole time. He doesn't ask you to do anything fancy beyond manage your stamina and a couple of directional dodges. It's what I love in Souls fights, delivered extremely well. Phase 2 maintains the rhythm while adding in some fairly fast AoEs and a tiny bit more pizzazz, but largely it's just the same enjoyable experience. Not that you'd really know it from the footage, because this axe is the best weapon I've used in any of these games, and it deleted him before Phase 2 even triggered in my win. But yeah, it's a bunch of fun. All hail the Germ Great Axe. The final boss here is locked behind yet another mini gank dungeon, the memory of the old Iron King. Much like the Iron Keep, which it's based on, it's a fun single trip, but a miserable run back on a really hard boss. There's like 20 knights and a few fireball lizards scattered across 2 rooms. If you take your time, you can work through it all in a reasonable fashion, but alone is pretty hard, and do you really want to take a full 6 minutes picking everything off carefully and never taking more than 5 steps forward without checking to see who you've angered? It's one of those ones where it's easy to dismiss with a stop trying to run past everything defense, but that rhetoric ignores how painful it is to repeatedly work it out properly. Sir Alon is my pick for the hardest boss in the game. He's actually kind of Elden Ring. Obviously the moveset is smaller and he can't drop AoEs every 5 seconds, but he has a few of the traits. He's pretty much unreactable. His swings come out so fast that you need to have learned the timing and dodge the moment or slightly before he actually starts swinging. The slow timings on Smelter and Fume punish you for dodging before you actually see the weapon move, but Alon is the opposite. You need to know when it's coming and hit preemptively. He also has combos that extend or end based off your positioning, so windows aren't as consistent as they are with other bosses in this era. He's a boss that I like when he's doing moves I've got a handle on, and dislike when he's using ones I don't. In particular, I don't like his charge, and it has such a dramatic timing difference if he does it from neutral or out of a jump. I do like the mechanic of him buffing if he lands the grab, which is another move I can't time to save my life though. The final DLC takes a lot of notes from Broom Tower. Ilium Noise is similarly just a single massive level with multiple distinct zones within the same structure with lots of links and cutbacks, and a mechanic that opens up like 30 treasure options halfway through. While I found it a bit fiddly taking notes of which new paths and elevator skips I'd already done in that level, this one basically has you play the whole level again, and it's a bit much. It must be said that pretty much none of the shortcuts are actually useful. Like they link areas of levels that are nowhere near bonfires, so they don't actually help you get around a lot. Also, these enemies are again basically the same as the ones in the other DLCs, so they start to feel a little samey, but I like the Major Knights a lot, and they are high quality trash mobs, so who can complain? The first boss here is one I may have ended up liking a lot more if I didn't beat her on the second try, given how quickly my feelings shifted between the 2 attempts. On my first try, I used 10 S's before I even landed a hit, with her jumping around so much and having these crazy delayed and under-animated swings. However, by that point, I'd learned most of her attacks, so the second go was very smooth, and I enjoyed punishing everything she did. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I don't like the enemies who don't have like audio feedback when getting hit. It makes everything feel very floaty and unimpactful, which given a very candid underdone spinning on a lazy Susan animations really did harm her visually. The other boss is largely a spectacle fight, and I'm cool with that. It's a good spectacle. The arena looks awesome, the knights kind of look like Alone Knights, and the pyromancers are annoying as hell, but it's a better take on the all-out war idea of the Giants' memories. The king himself, yet again the axe kind of skipped the fight since he only had 3 hits left in him when my last buddy went down. If my guys weren't morons and closed the last gate before the boss showed up, instead of waiting for it to be a 2-on-2, I'm pretty confident he would have survived. He seems pretty cool, some decent style with that giant laser sword. He has some long wind-up times, but he always has trigger movements before the actual move happens, so you can react to it based on instinct. He seems like a good cap-off for a spectacle fight. With such a good level and boss, it's a shame there's only 1 area and 2 bosses for this DLC. Sure, Broom Tower undid all its good work with 2 horrible mini-areas, but they could have tried again and did something better. So it's a shame there's absolutely nothing else here in the entire deal. Oh wait. Oh no. The frigid outskirts are exactly as bad as everyone has said. As with most of the places that cop a lot of hate here, being a little bit careful and aware of your surroundings helps. You can get through it pretty easily if you stop and kill the goddamn horses before the next blizzard kicks up, so you don't need to fight 2 of them. But that ignores the fact that it's extremely annoying to do. Not to mention, the horses aren't very cooperative. If they decide to do a bunch of jumping moves, you're basically locked into getting into a 2-on-1 with them. And if you try to sprint past, they're faster and will charge you down before you make it to cover. This place is a big, boring-ass field of white with infinitely spawning trash fire enemies where your visibility disappears every 15 seconds. It's not that hard if you work through it, but it's possibly the worst level I've ever seen in any game ever. And the boss might actually be worse. It's a reskin of the first boss from the same area, except now they're black, and there's two of them. They do not remotely complement each other. They're a boss full of very specific timing requirements that only present windows after dodging into them, that move around a lot, do half your health per hit, and have range options which hit just as hard. I tried to solo this like 6 times, and every time I died about 15 seconds of the ad happening, just because I got wrecked from something off screen or getting hit by the other one while I dodged the first one's attacks. I have no idea what you're even meant to do since you can't attack from neutral. Just run in circles until one of them does ice spears and hope the other one doesn't follow you? I'm not doing that crap. Eventually I decided it wasn't worth it and ganked it with summons, which still took a few tries because I'd still get one comboed from off screen because you can't keep both of them in focus when they move so much. It's an atrocious fight. I hope no one involved in its creation lives a fulfilling life. It's crazy how severe the gap is between the two parts of this DLC. So with that whole mess dealt with, never to be considered again, I think that's everything there is to do in DS2. So I'm off to the triple boss, and it's a conga line of mediocrity really. First up are the Throne Watcher and Defender, who offers a duo fight where one is big and one is small, but unlike Onsen and Smo, they're both just kinda slow and walk at you together. They're pretty low aggression, so it's not hard to chip them down, and the movesets are basically the same as the regular mobs in all the DLC, just less aggressive. The big gimmick is that if you kill one too long before the second, they'll revive with maximum health, which is a lame gimmick. With them meekly eating a few Estus, the Chandra shows up and still basically just meekly eats a few Estus. She actually engaged me more with melee than I remembered, but that may just be because I was extremely reckless given I misremembered her not doing anything up close aside from the AoE. She looks sorta cool. I think she'd look a little better if she was a little bit smaller and had a less bulbous skirt. There's the curse things I guess, but just smack them or ignore them, or wear some DLC equipment. They're basically nothing. Sadly, my dreams of a one-run triple kill fell in a hole when I fell in a hole. Eldia is super turn-based, with him basically going into an immune state, throwing a couple of spells at you, then become squishy for a few seconds. It's pretty tedious, honestly. I did discover there's a hole he can knock you down, but really, his moves are so spaced out that otherwise it's impossible for him to kill you. So it's just boring. And that's Dark Souls 2. I could grind up a couple 100,000 souls and buy out the merchants then go on a murder hobo spree, but I can't be bothered. Overall, despite it leaving a very sour taste in my mouth since the last session on it was so horrible and then mediocre, I'm surprised, yet very happy to say that this was really quite good. Sadly, I will have to retire my Star Wars prequel fans of gaming zingers. I enjoyed making those, but annoyingly, I like Dark Souls 2 more. Obviously, my original memory is hazy, but generally I like the changes that I noticed in Scholar over the original. Everyone says the gank got turned up more in Scholar, but I remember getting pincered or circled a lot more in Vanilla, despite the additional enemies here. Said additional enemies provide a lot more variety in encounters too, which generally improve the areas, like how the Forest of Fallen Giants is spiced up by having a bunch of the Turtle Knights mixed into the first half. Outside of that, moving the Infusion Ember was super smart. I generally like the NPC invasion thing, giving a nice fake sense of life to the game. I think it could be really expanded to let us offliners do mock-up Covenant stuff to replace all the soul-crushing enemy drop grinds for Covenant rewards for cheap asses like myself, or once the service gets shut down if they haven't already. It could even scale based on soul memory to incentivize using the Agate Ring instead of getting crazy over-leveled since the Scholar version gives so many souls. As for drawbacks, I'm not fond of the branch statue spam, it just seems pointless. And some of the areas are definitely worse, Armana obviously, but also things like the Hide Knights or the Terror Flame, making getting up from the bonfire a nightmare once they're activated. As for the game in general, there's a few things the game does that I think are missing from all the others. Bonfire aesthetic should be in every single Souls-like game ever made, not just the From ones, and I have no idea why they're not. I respawned a handful of bosses here to get upgraded rings, and if I was committed, I could have easily done several more. Honestly, if it wasn't for Vendrick stuff requiring actual New Game Plus 2, I probably would have respawned every boss with multi-use souls for the collectionism. But it's not really worth it since we need to fight them all 3 times anyway for everything. The weapon variety and selection is outstanding. Not that you'd know it given I used one weapon the entire game because it was so damn good. And unlike the Black Knight sword from DS1, it was actually fun to use because all of its moves were viable. I actually upgraded a few things along the way to try and get some variety in, but the damage per hit at that speed is nuts and I couldn't let it go. I had the stats for it, so I gave the Fugs a go, and while it did like 60 damage more per swing, that didn't let it kill anything in less hits than the axe. which could deliver those hits twice as fast. Basically, it's ultra greatsword damage at battle axe speed. God damn. I also actually like the enemy despawn system. If something annoys you, you can get revenge and just make them not exist. And if you want to farm, you've got to do it on hard mode. I think it did empower them to make some really bad runbacks, but they could have done that anyway. As for the stuff I'm actually rating here, I've got to change my rhetoric on the level design big time. Sure, Hyde's Terror Flame is still just a T intersection, and it being a popular level still baffles me, but pretty much every stage is fairly well put together. The critical paths are straight lines, but they all have fairly sizable looting side paths which hoop around and open new doorways. They're just contained to the loot paths themselves rather than the critical path. So dismissing it merely as lacking shortcuts requires an assumption that progression shortcuts are the only way to design Souls levels, and if that was true, only half the levels in the old games would pass anyway. There are a few very bad runbacks in here, particularly in optional areas. They tend to be fairly enjoyable levels to work through slowly rather than just, here's a room with 16 guys in it, outside of the odd iron passage mess, but they didn't consider that people may be running through the segments multiple times with a major goal at the end. The boss roster, however, was pretty bad. There's obviously the throwaway mob trash, but there's a focus on bigger duels with warriors, and they forgot to give said warriors more moves than the usual trash mobs. There's like 14 Taurus or Capra Demon tier enemies in the boss roster. Hell, even the good ones still tend to not have a whole lot going on. They just have more entertaining pacing and window management for heals. The general standard was more middling than downright awful, but there's so few major highlights that the odd complete stinker never really gets made up for. The DLCs were curious things. The main cores of them are really quite good. They've got massive, intricate levels with gimmicks that aren't off-putting. They all look really good. The core enemies are all kind of the same as each other, but they're the best trash mobs in the game, so it's not too bad. They tend to have pretty ordinary boss spacing, with all but Ava showing up in the last 10 minutes of the level, but they're all solid new content. And then they put in the side areas, which are so insufferably bad, it basically undoes all the good work of the main core. My system here does punish this a bit too harshly, given the huge good parts are more like 2 hours of content, while the bad parts struggle to go past 5 minutes. So the consistency scales becomes inconsistent with how much content is being looked at. It's a bit unfair that hours of good times can be ruined by sequences of 3 rooms. Oh well, we're too far in now. Unsurprisingly, DS2 has still ended up at the bottom of the tree here, but it put up a lot more of a fight than I expected, ending up with comfortably over 100 points. In fact, it actually outscored the base Dark Souls 1 for me on the level score, which kind of blows my mind. Admittedly, that's including the DLCs, so it has like a dozen more stages, but with the DLCs kind of ruining themselves, it's not even a case of those saving a game which had been flailing. Those extra DLC areas did a lot of damage to those portions because they are so relentlessly repellent. Hell, if the Frigid Outskirts didn't exist, it would have beaten Demon Souls. I do think that the Iron King DLC is my favourite of the 3, but overall in reality the Ivory King is pretty close, particularly if you never, ever go to the Frigid Outskirts. Ever. And with that all sorted, we're done for another one. Obviously Bloodborne is the next one in this particular series, but I have just played 3 Souls games in a row, so I feel like I may need to do something a little bit more relaxed for a minute. Maybe I'll go back to the zoo. I like doing this format, so maybe I might be doing a twist on it for another series, or maybe I'll do something completely different, like a general think piece about gaming, or even add in some film or television takes. Honestly, no idea. Not leaning any particular way at this time. I'll see you for whatever happens, whenever it happens.